I want you to hear this clearly. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling this. The anxious avoidant pairing is one of the most documented dynamics in all of relationship psychology. These two styles are magnetized to each other. And the reason isn't a mystery. It's actually very logical once you understand it. Welcome back to Pulling Threads. I am so glad you're here. If you found your way to this episode, I want to start by saying something before we even begin. Whatever brought you here, if it's confusion, heartache, hope, or all three at once, it's valid. Completely. You're not crazy for finding this complicated because love is complicated. And today we are going to talk about one of the most misunderstood and quietly agonizing dynamics that women bring to me more than almost any other, the avoidant. And I even have one of my own. Specifically, what happens when you love an avoidant. Today's episode is a deep dive. We're going to cover the full picture, what attachment styles actually are, where they come from, the two distinct types of avoidant attachment, and why they're not the same. Why women who are secure or anxiously attached are so often magnetically drawn to avoidant partners. What that cycle actually looks like from the inside. And this is the part I really want you to lean into, what it actually takes to build something real with someone whose nervous system learned to protect itself by pulling away. I am doing this episode because when I met my partner and realized at 4 months in, when he tried to pull away, that this is what I was dealing with, all I could find were snippets telling me to walk away, telling me it wasn't worth it, telling me there was nothing I could do, run. And I understand why those snippets exist and why most people have that response. That's not what I wanted to hear at all. So this is not a how to fix him episode. I want to be clear about that. This is a how to understand what's actually happening so you can make empowered, clear-eyed choices for yourself. Because you deserve to choose consciously, not from fear, not from the hunger of a wound, from a place of genuine knowing. And know that as I explain these things to you, I've been where you are. If you are in a relationship with, or you have been in a relationship with an avoidant man, I get it. I'm 2.5 years in with one, and I did the impossible. So let's start with attachment theory. Okay. It was developed by a psychiatrist named John Bowlby back in the 1950s. So it is not new, even though it is kind of trendy and seems new to many people. His essential discovery was that the bonds we form with our caregivers in early childhood don't just shape our childhoods. They shape the template we bring into every relationship we have as adults. And I want to say this episode is also beneficial for any avoidant man listening. While I've geared it towards women, I should say this could be just as helpful for you if you have figured out that you have an avoidant attachment style and you want to learn about yourself. So you are welcome to. Mary Ainsworth built on John's work with a famous study that you might have heard of. It's called The Strange Situation. She observed how infants responded when their caregivers left and then came back. There's a video online that you might have seen. But what she found was the same. Some were upset when the caregiver left, but calmed easily when they returned. Those were the secure ones. Others were inconsolable, clingy, and difficult to soothe even after the caregiver returned. Those were the anxiously attached. And some seemed almost indifferent. They didn't show much distress when the caregiver left and didn't really seek comfort when they came back. Those were the avoidant ones. So here's what I want you to hear. None of these children chose their responses. Their nervous systems were adapting to the world that they were given. They were doing the most intelligent thing available to them, given the emotional environment that they were born into. That's still true in adulthood. 4 styles have been identified. Secure attachment, who are comfortable with both closeness and independence. They're able to say what they need, tolerate hard moments, and trust that love doesn't disappear just because things get difficult. Anxious attachment, sometimes called preoccupied. The deep need for closeness is there. They're hypervigilant to shifts in partners' mood or energy, meaning very responsive, notice every shift. They have a fear of abandonment that can feel all consuming. And I 100% or have had that. The internal narrative for someone who has an anxious attachment is often, I have to earn love. I have to be enough. I have to hold on or I'll lose it. And they will hold on fiercely. Then we have the dismissive avoidant. A high value for them is placed on independence. So emotional intimacy feels uncomfortable, sometimes threatening, but may not in the beginning. These folks often present as the most together person in the room. They're calm, they're self sufficient, they're a little distant. They'll tell you they don't really need anyone. And they might even be the most loving and doting in the beginning of a relationship. And then the fourth, the fearful avoidant, sometimes called disorganized. This one is the most complex. The person simultaneously wants deep, deep connection and they're terrified of it. They're the push, pull, the hot and the cold, the most magnetic and most confusing partner you may have ever had. We're going to spend real time on both of those avoidance styles because they're not the same, and understanding the difference does matter. So, dismissive versus fearful avoidance. Understanding the difference is important. I hear a lot of women conflate these two all the time, and I understand why. Because from the outside, both can look like the same thing. A man who seems to keep you at arm's length, but the internal experience, the origin story, and the relational patterns are very different for the two. And knowing the difference will completely change how you relate to them and engage with them. So let's start with the dismissive avoidant. This style develops most often in response to an emotional unavailability in very early caregiving. A parent who was physically present but emotionally distant. A household where feelings were not discussed, were not allowed, where needing comfort was seen as weakness. Self-reliance was quietly developed. The child adapted by learning to turn the volume down on his own attachment needs. Not suppress them, but turn them down. Maybe even deactivate them. As an adult, the dismissive avoidant man genuinely believes that he doesn't need much intimacy. That's not a performance, it's his lived reality. He's wired for independence. He has very strong boundaries, sometimes walls, and he doesn't naturally move toward emotional closeness when he's stressed. He moves away from it. He's not cycling, and that's really important to understand. He's not hot and cold. He's consistent, consistently at a managed distance. He'll commit, he can stay, he can even be a good partner, but he will require enormous patience and will struggle to meet needs for emotional depth or verbal intimacy. When he does show love, it often looks like actions. So, showing up, fixing things, providing, being reliable, but not words, not vulnerability. That's the dismissive avoidant. They will be dismissive frequently around the fourth month payday. Now the fearful avoidant. This is someone whose early caregiving was not just unavailable, it was chaotic, frightening, probably, possibly abusive. This is the child who learned that the very person meant to be their safe harbor was also a source of danger. The person who was supposed to comfort them was sometimes the one causing the fear. That creates an internal architecture where love and fear become fused together, where intimacy is both the most desired thing and the most threatening thing, where the nervous system has never, not once, learned that closeness is consistently safe. As an adult, this shows up as a partner who can seem deeply, deeply present one moment and completely gone next, who falls hard and fast. He may even feel like a soulmate early on. And then he pulls back sharply the moment the relationship deepens. He's not doing this to you. He's doing it because his nervous system has just gotten close enough to love that the ancient alarm system activates. Danger, retreat, protect yourself. The research describes a fearful avoidant as a big feeler. They're emotionally alive, often generous, often highly empathetic, and also highly reactive. They can swing from 100% to 0% in ways that feel completely devastating to a partner who doesn't understand what's happening. So, one man who keeps you at a steady distance because closeness makes him uncomfortable, and one who reaches for you and then runs because closeness makes him terrified. Very different nervous systems, very different needs, and very different approaches required from you if you want him to be your partner. So let's dig into that. First, let's dig into why you're drawn to him, because it probably makes sense. So let's talk about something that women feel quietly ashamed of, right? The pull towards these men, the undeniable, sometimes irrational, often exquisitely painful pull towards someone whose emotional unavailability seems to increase rather than decrease your desire for him. I want you to hear this clearly. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling this. The anxious-avoidant pairing is one of the most documented dynamics in all of relationship psychology. These two styles are magnetized to each other. And the reason isn't a mystery. It's actually very logical once you understand it. For the anxiously attached woman, the avoidant partner activates a landscape that feels at like a deep cellular level like home. If your childhood involved caregivers who are sometimes warm and sometimes absent, loving but unpredictable, then emotional inconsistency got normalized. Not because it felt good, but because it was familiar. The anxious child becomes a woman who is exquisitely attuned to shifts in her partner's energy because she was trained to read the room to stay safe. She developed enormous emotional intelligence, enormous sensitivity, and the avoidant man's intermittent warmth, those moments when he does show up, does open up, does reach for her, it floods her system with relief in a way that is consistently present. Partner often doesn't. That's not a flaw in her capacity to. It's neurochemistry of intermittent reinforcement. The unpredictable reward creates a stronger pull than the predictable one. It's the same reason gambling is more addictive than earning a steady paycheck. And for the securely attached woman, I want to name this too because it gets overlooked. You are not immune to loving someone complicated. Secure attachment gives you the emotional regulation and the self-trust to stay steady in the face of an avoidant partner's fluctuation. What you have to watch for is mistaking your capacity to hold the relationship together for evidence that the relationship is healthy. A secure woman can sometimes out-tolerate a dynamic that is actually not serving her. Your groundedness is a gift. Don't let it become a reason to stay somewhere that you shouldn't. I might be guilty of it. The avoidant man on the other side of this is drawn to you, whether you're anxious or secure, because you represent what his attachment system has always craved, never fully trusted. Warmth, consistency, the possibility that closeness might actually be safe. He chooses you, and then something in him fights the choosing. And if you're secure, you're aware enough to know that. So let's talk about what the cycle actually looks like. Let's make this concrete because I think naming the cycle is itself a form of healing. You get close, the relationship deepens, something softens in it. You can feel it. And this is real. This moment is real. And then he pulls back. Maybe he even ghosts you. Or maybe it's subtle. Maybe it's sudden. A withdrawal of attention, shorter texts, canceling plans with an excuse that feels thin, the kind of emotional cooling that you feel before you can name it. But your nervous system feels it and it activates. You immediately want to know what's changed. What did I do? Is he losing interest? Did I push too hard? You reach for reassurance. Maybe you text more frequently, or you might perform a studied aching calm, checking your phone while trying not to check your phone. Either way, internally, anxiety, searching, a hypervigilance that has always been a way of trying to predict what comes next. Well, he feels that increased energy coming toward him, and he is going to retreat and retreat further. Not because he doesn't care, because the closeness just spiked his nervous system's threat response. Your activation is amplifying his. The distance becomes his own crisis. And then, usually at the point where he's afraid of actually losing you, he comes back and he's warm and he's present. You feel immense relief. Nothing feels better than this relief, the relief of reconnection. And you mistake it for resolution, but nothing's been resolved. The cycle's just starting. I want to say something really important here. This cycle is painful for both people. The avoidant man is not having a good time. His inner experience is one of deep, deep conflict. He wants love. He wants safety. He wants security. He also cannot fully receive it without his nervous system interpreting it as danger. That's not a comfortable way to live. Understanding that doesn't mean excusing his behavior when it hurts you, but it does mean that you stop making his withdrawal about your worth or enoughness. Those are two entirely different things, and it's really important for you to understand. So I want to give you what most people talking about this online are not giving you. I want to give you practical tools for navigating this. First, I want to take a deep because this has not only been something that I have studied and helped many, many women through and couples through, but it's also been my lived experience. So I get it. And I get the urge and the desire to stay. That's why I want to give you tools. When I work with couples who are in this dynamic, I'm giving them tools to understand each other better, to try to help them stay together and make this work, because these connections can be magical when they're not terrible, okay? But you have to understand what is happening in each other, not just yourself. And you have to be committed to protect yourself and walk away if it's causing harm. Here's where I want to get really practical, because theory without tools is just interesting information that you hear online, okay? And then you lie awake at 2 a.m. thinking about it. First, understand his specific flavor. Is your man dismissive, consistent, contained, emotionally steady but distant, or fearful, cycling between intensity and withdrawal? The tools are different. The pace of trust building is different. Your expectations need to reflect which nervous system that you're actually working with. Second, change the language of your needs. Avoidant partners, both types, will shut down faster than you can blink if they feel assessed or diagnosed. It's really important. You always pull away, saying you always pull away, activates defensiveness. Saying, when you go quiet, I feel disconnected and I miss you. Can we figure out how to talk about this? That opens a door. Saying, when you go quiet, I feel disconnected and I miss you. Can we figure out how to talk about this? That opens a door. Speak your own experience. Do not narrate his. Give space as a gift, not a threat. And I know this is hard. I know. Especially for anxiously attached women who experience space as abandonment. But when you can offer a dismissive avoidant genuine room to breathe without punishing it for needing it, without performing indifference while internally panicking, you begin to rewire his association between closeness and the loss of autonomy, which is you want to give him a new experience. And this takes time and it takes repetition, but it works. But what you need is to rewire your brain that they're not going anywhere. They're not leaving. They just need space. If you give them the space, it's magical. But you've got to tell yourself and that little part of you that feels abandoned that you're not going to be left, that they're not leaving. Okay? It's important because it's really hard for you to stay regulated and they're going to pick up on your dysregulation. In fact, if you're dysregulated, better not to be around. They know. They are hypervigilant too in scanning the room and knowing when it's not safe to be around you. So regulate yourself before any conversations. An activated version of you will predictably activate his avoidance. Okay. This is not about suppressing your needs. It is about processing your fear, abandonment, or other fears before the conversation rather than during it. Go for a walk, write in your journal, call a friend, do something that brings you back to yourself, your own self, not the self that's waiting for him to settle your nervous system. Okay. Before you try to connect with him. Learn his love language and accept it. Avoidant partners, particularly the dismissive type, often show love through action. They show up, they fix things, they remember what you mentioned once 3 months ago, and they quietly act on it. If you're waiting for a verbal declaration or emotional intimacy at a pace that feels secure to you, you're going to miss the ways that he actually does love you. That's not asking you to accept less than what you need or change what you need. It's asking you to look clearly at what's actually happening and what's present before deciding that it's present. And this last one is most important. Do your own work. I can't say this strongly enough. Understanding your own attachment wounds, your own patterns. Why his unavailability feels familiar. Why his withdrawal activates you so profoundly. This is the work that cannot be delegated to the relationship. It has to be yours. Therapy, inner work, spiritual practice, community support. These are the structures that hold you while you hold the complexity of this love. It is complex and it's challenging. Sometimes all the work and all the effort isn't it. I want to end something that I always want to say and something I always want to be heard. Attachment theory does not ask you to stay in a relationship that is causing you consistent pain without moving toward growth. The capacity for a deeply avoidant person to develop more secure patterns is real, but it requires a genuine willingness on their part, a genuine desire to reflect, to stretch, stay in the discomfort of intimacy long enough to see what's possible. If you have been the only one doing the work, if your needs are consistently dismissed, if every attempt at closeness is met some unchanging withdrawal, that information deserves to be honored. And choosing yourself is not the same as giving up. Sometimes it's the most loving, most aligned, most courageous choice available to you. And sometimes with the right partner, with enough safety and time and mutual commitment to growth, an anxious woman, avoidant man, built something extraordinary because they have each done the thing that the other needed to do. She's learned to find her ground without him. And he's learned to stay even when staying is the hardest thing he's ever done. That's real. I have lived that with my partner. When I realized that his biggest fears were loss of independence and abandonment at the same time, I knew I had to show him that I could give him space and that I could control my anxious issues and that I wouldn't put that around him to trigger him even more. And I showed him that when he took space, I would still be waiting for him and I wouldn't. Those two beliefs that avoidant attachment can only be with immense amount of compassion. But I believe in some cases, you have to know the difference between whether you should stay or should go. And ultimately, you need to always honor what's best for you and what's safest for you and your nervous system. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope something in this conversation gave you language for something that you've been feeling. Maybe clarity for something that's felt confusing or permission to trust what you already know. If you'd like to go deeper, on your own attachment patterns or explore how these dynamics are showing up in your life right now, I invite you to visit theloomlife.com. I work with women who are rebuilding, reclaiming, learning to love, learning their own attachment styles, nervous systems, and how to regulate